If you're an optimist and believe in the ingenuity of the human race to get things done, I do think we'll get it sorted.
Welcome to the Bailiwick Express podcast. My name is Matthew Leach. I'll be joined each week by a guest for a series of podcasts. Each will shine a light on topics from across the bailiwick. The format will change week to week. We'll have debates, reviews, hot seat interviews and special guests. So stick with us as we offer some insight on some of the most important issues we in the bailiwick face. The 26th UN Summit on Climate Change, COP26, is well underway, with hundreds of nations coming together in Glasgow this year to tackle climate change. Some of the big headlines from this year include the pledge from more than 100 countries to reverse deforestation by 2030, and £6 billion being pledged to South Africa to ditch coal. To give his insight on the event so far, expert economist, strategist and local advocate for sustainable finance, Dr. Andy Sloan came in to talk to us. He's the founder of the International Sustainability Institute and sits on the board of the ESI Monitor. He tells us what the biggest takeaways have been so far and why Guernsey plays such an important role in a diverse global issue. Tell us, what do you make of the event so far, of the summit so far? We'll come on to a more local spiel about it later, but as it stands, how's it going?
It's going all right. There was a lot of ooh and ahhing because China wasn't coming, and China's the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases on the planet, sort of thing. But they have made a commitment to 2060. It's 10 years later than we've got. But the week started off all right. The Indians made a commitment. It was better than nothing. Then you had the methane, but that was sort of done. The commitment to reduce methane, which is cows' backsides, etc., and it's one of the biggest contributors to carbon, and it usually doesn't get quite as big a headline as everything else. But that agreement was sort of made back in, I think, September time when Boris went to New York to visit the UN. So that wasn't particularly new news. And yesterday we had the big finance day, and it was all right. You had Mark Kearney with his private, the GFANs, the private commitments. Because what COP is, it's basically, don't tell anybody, it's quite dull as dishwasher, to be quite frank. What it is it's a bunch of governments, the intergovernmental conference for 2 weeks, effectively trying to rework the agreements on what each government is doing to reduce climate change. And so everyone has nationally determined contribution. Oh, I'll reduce by this, and I'll reduce by that, and then and then horse trading going on. And there's 70 odd whatever participants there. 175 were at COP21, 88% of greenhouse gas emissions, and they're basically agreeing a text of what they're going to do. And the rest of it is about what they're announcing while it's going on, and it really is about generating momentum in terms of global consensus and action and public opinion, and trying to get people on board. So yesterday with the finance sector is a big deal because climate change mitigation, the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, said, look, climate change is not a good thing, existential threat to the human race, dinosaurs, extinction rebellion, etc. And broadly speaking, you go back 15-20 years, the forecast was that climate would go up by about 7-8 degrees. And there's been quite a bit of action in the last 20 years. Kyoto, our emissions are like 40-45% less than they were in whenever. And so there has been progress. But we're still talking about a climate change of about 3 degrees without any more that we're doing today. And to get it down to 1.5 and 2 degrees, which is what the IPCC has said is like the manageable bit for us, requires a lot of investment, a lot of money. And we're talking the amount of money that's gone into stopping climate change, or mitigating it, I should say, you're not going to be able to stop it, has been 30-40% of what's required over the last 5 years since 6 years since we got together in Paris. And Paris was the big one when they said, look, do you know what, finance is key to this. If we get the finance sector on board, that'll be a jolly good thing. And that's broadly where we've been at for the last 6 years. So we come to Guernsey. We've, I established Guernsey Green Finance a few years ago when I joined Guernsey Finance, and it was basically an initiative to get us all sort of excited and on board with, trying to finance climate change mitigation. We launched the Guernsey Green Fund, the ESG framework for insurers, And that's all great news and everything like that, and that's really good. But we're still massively short of where we need to be, and climate risk itself is quite an existential thing. You know, we live on an island. You know, we can physically work it out. Well, sea levels will rise, and there'll be less of the island for us to live on. But less facetiously, there's lots of things that we can do locally, and it's all about everyone doing their bit. You know, if I turn around and say, well, it's up to somebody else to do it, you're in the realms of Niemöller. And, when they came for me, there was no one left to speak up for me, the poem I'm referring to. But, if we all leave it to somebody else, nothing will get done. But lots of has been done. It's about doing more. And yesterday was the big, the day of real interest to us in Guernsey. But quite frankly, one of the reasons why I set up the Institute is we can do great things in finance, and we are doing great things in finance, and there's more that we can do. But on the environmental side too, the opportunity for us is massive. We've got amazing resources here that we really, across the two islands, ought to be able to harness and give something back to the world. Because we're not known for that, giving things back to the world over here. We're sort of seen as takers by the French amongst many things, take of other people's taxes, that sort of thing. And it would be nice if we could just generally re-engineer ourselves across both the environmental, the financial and the fiscal side, which is the reason why I launched the International Sustainability Institute, the Channel Islands, was to actually bring across those three different areas and try and give something back to the world, across the piece.
And so you're talking about the cost it's going to be. It's going to cost a lot of money to enact these changes to do what we're talking about here. And of course, I suppose we could say that governments possibly don't have enough money to do this kind of stuff. Are we trying to mobilise private capital here?
Yeah.
And is this where we come into play, I suppose, as an island?
Yeah. I mean, and it's about that. One of the four strands of COP has been, one of the four strands of the finance bit of COP has been actually mobilisation of private capital. So you've got the nationally determined contributions to reduce climate, carbon emissions of countries. Then you've got a commitment to fund the developing world. And then, but then you're talking, the shortfall of what's required to invest in actually, achieving the goals. We're talking trillions. And if you look at where the wealth is held in the world, most of it is held in private hands. And if you're not going to mobilise the wealth that's in the hands of the people in private hands, then you're not going to mobilise capital. So it is about harnessing private capital, and that's something that Guernsey we're pretty good at. We're pretty good at it in Jersey as well, to be frank. And it's about being able to provide basically the platform, the route to sort of funnel capital to doing good things, and whether it's a private fund or a family office or a trust, looking to facilitate that sort of investment. It is a route of investment that more and more owners of private wealth wish to see their capital deployed. Particularly in the uber rich. The uber rich are generally tend to. You've got to remember that one thing that the uber rich want to do is preserve their capital. They're not into wasting it or losing it.
Yeah.
But while they're doing enhancing the public good that their capital can achieve, is something you'll find lots of people want to do. I mean, you get the Bill Gates initiative is about giving back half their wealth.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to remember that, but that sort of philanthropic, wanting to do good, wanting to it's like Maslow's hierarchy, isn't it? Once me and you have managed to sort of put some food on the table and a roof over our head, then we sort of worry about maybe a bit of entertainment, a bit of leisure time. But once you're that sort of rich, and your hierarchy goes up to so much money, I need to do good with it.
You talk about all this money, this trillions you mentioned before. I mean, what is that being spent on? What are we talking about?
It's not. That's the problem at the moment.
And what should it be spent on?
You have got huge amounts of requirements for energy transition. One of the big arguments about COP this time round has been the fact that the Chinese are still planning to invest in another round of coal-fired power generation.
They agreed, didn't they? The EU or France agreed to fund South Africa to stop coal. This was decided this week or yesterday.
I missed that, but the detail of that particular one. I may say to fund all of South Africa, but I do know the South Africans remember them popping up beforehand going, hey, you remember you said it was going to cost you 100 billion a year? Think of it as more than $750 billion. 750 billion. And I think there's a bit of, like I say, negotiation going on there. The South Africans saying, come on guys, bit more please. So there was that, but the coal issue is respects of, there was some slight agreement to not fund any more foreign sort of coal. So the Chinese said, look, we'll stop financing more coal generation building elsewhere, but not domestically. But you think about that, and that's still the levels required to get to a net zero pathway by 2050 is around 1.5 trillion per annum over that time period. And it has been over the last 5 years, and we've been running at like 30-40% of that, and that's just in renewables. Then you're talking about transport, you're talking about transitioning us all off the internal combustion engine, you're talking about supply chains, you're talking about adaptation. And one of the things that's probably doesn't really grab the headlines for us here, you're talking about Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa and the developing world, where, quite frankly, if you're asking people to commit to a net zero future now, you're denying them the ability to increase their lot and standard of living in life. You know.
Could they skip a stage? Is there an argument to be said?
At disproportionate cost to them. I mean, this is one of the big issues in the sort of the big dilemma is in Sub-Saharan Africa, the risk-adjusted return to climate adaptation is much lower than what private capital is seeking to achieve. So North American pension funds got oodles of capital, Sub-Saharan Africa, lots of things that you could do, except the return available in Sub-Saharan Africa doesn't match what they need and that never the twain shall meet issue is something that nobody's quite yet gotten there, has managed to find that silver bullet, because without that you are unable, it's sort of, is it wrong for Africans to have a decent energy and or water requirements if they're producing a little bit of carbon at levels minor percentage points or basis points of what we've emitted over the last 200 years? So there is that fairness issue there that, and financing that through private capital is something that nobody's yet managed to resolve.
We talk about private capital and finance. Well, I'll bring it right back round to Guernsey. Of course, we're going to talk about local language. We've got local representatives in COP26 this year. So, do you believe we have an important role to play in this very international stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that Jonathan and Lindsay are there. Flying the flag for Guernsey and being involved. I think it's important in terms of our general recognition as a jurisdiction. It's maturity of the jurisdiction that we're there. We're not a sovereign state, so we don't get to participate directly. We're under the UK's umbrella. We're part of the British family. But I think hopefully, what we can do is, yes, we can help finance, but we need to do the other things as well. It's about recognising that maybe. I say to my little lad about, what would Jesus do, mate? And it's like, well, seriously, you wouldn't leave it to everybody else to do. You do unto others. It's about doing our bit. And if we come back and we recognise that, we haven't yet met anywhere near the required sort of standards of building. The way that we build it locally, in general, is decades behind in terms of standards of sustainability to the mainland. That we know that we're going to have to replace our oil-fired boilers on the island at some juncture, that we've got this huge amount of resources there. I think one good thing could come out of this, and again, this is something that I've publishing under the Institute's banner in the coming weeks, is the idea that the concept we could be the Tarawa Islands, together with Jersey, with our long-standing friends across the water there. We should be able to harness what is effective, gigawatts and terawatts of energy in a renewable manner and export that to the continent at some juncture. It's not fantasy. It is perfectly physically possible, and it's financially possible within a reasonable time horizon. You've just got to do the numbers and work it out, and it is doable, but it will require private capital. And again, hopefully one of the Institute's role is to be able to advocate that sort of thing and show people how that might happen, and maybe attract private capital into helping us achieve some of those types of goals.
Is there an appetite for that here?
I think never more so than there has been all the time I've been on the island. I have been in conversations with owners of private wealth, family offices and such, and I think there seems to be almost a critical mass of similar thinking here, and it's possibly maybe seize the day and see if we can do something this time around. Yeah, it's been something that's been. I'm from Hull originally. I've been promised triennial energy for the last 50 years. It's still never happened. The power of the tide out there is something that really ought to be highlighted. It'd be great if we could do something.
I couldn't agree with you more on that one. Finish off, I suppose, with when we talk about climate change. The news up until this point has been quite scary for some people, doom and gloom kind of thing. We've got ourselves into a position. Can we have a sunnier outlook after COP26? Have there been enough headlines of decisions being made?
I mean, I think both. There's often a very mismatch in all walks of life between the rhetoric and reality of a lot of things. So the rhetoric of doom and gloom is some argue it's slightly overdone. At the end of the day, where human beings are pretty innovative. And that despite everything else, the amount of people dying from extreme weather events is its lowest it's ever been. That's fact. It's not. I'm not making that bit up. So in some respects, it's there's the scare stories about it was the worst for climate events last year. Yeah, sort of like bring it back to a bit more grounded, please. And so the human race can be innovative and get things done. And there are some people that talk about the S curve, and so it could quite well be a new technology in the next 15, 20 years that takes carbon out of the atmosphere, and hey presto, job done. That is not beyond the scale, beyond the realms of possibility. So quite frankly, if you're an optimist and believe in the ingenuity of the human race to get things done, I do think we'll get it sorted. It might not be quite in that sort of smooth path that it would be nice. But we saw some of what's called the transition risks in recent months, where the UK had its problems with energy, buying gas because the Russians are exporting the stuff at the moment, and the prices through the roof.
Come over here as well. And
the
knock-on effect. Yeah,
States is having to give, or is looking at giving discounts or vouchers.
They did a release this week. Yeah,
and that's all about the wholesale price markets. To keep COP going last night, I think they had to pull on board 2 coal-fired, which they managed to get 400 times the typical spot price to at the margin to bring that electricity on stream. Eye-popping in the amounts.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily there's got to be a much more sensible route to managing the transition from A to B than that wholesale. You remember the dash for gas back in the days? That was pretty inconsequential, but the dash for renewables has to be managed until the battery technology catches up and you can store the energy. So in the meantime, you're going to have to do some things that maybe you prefer not to do.
Yeah.
But around the corner, there could be something amazing that you haven't foreseen yet.
Thank you for listening to the Bailiwick Express podcast. The title track was Shift My Weight by Luno. If you enjoyed it, I know it's a pain, but please like and share. It all helps, and remember, you can hit bailiwickexpress.com to stay right up to date with whatever is happening in the Bailiwick. You can find us online, on social, on email, and on internet radio. There'll be more from me, Matthew Leach, and all the Bailiwick Express team next Friday.